Hello there, YouTube crew. I'm the real Dill, and today we're taking it back to Mission Impossible 2, and it's got to be my least favorite every time I rewatch the series. But it's still a fun, stylish movie, and a lot of franchises wish their worst in the series was up to this quality. Directorial style, tone. This movie is very much a John Woo feature. It's cool and stylish and melodramatic, bigger and bolder than one. Its action is over the top in a way only Woo can do. And while I think most of this works pretty well, it just doesn't have the intrigue that you want from this type of movie. And, it's just not quite Mission Impossible, so 2 points. Mood. Yes, this is a fun popcorn flick, but I think some culminating factors, particularly the rushed, burning romance, ends up making the sequel quite disposable to the audience. 1 point. Score. I've got to say, I like this score a lot more than I remembered I did. I mean, the rock kind of beat and the electric guitar to the main theme gives it a very early 2000s feel to it. But it works for the movie. It works for the movie a lot better than I would have thought. I thought it would have dated it a lot more, but it just fits the style of the movie. And then there's Hans Zimmer bringing in those operatic vocals that he likes to bring in every now and then. And I gotta say, they sell the melodrama a lot more than I'm comfortable saying they do. Honestly, I'd give it 3 points if it hit a little harder in the climax. Like, it feels like, the preview from the earlier part of the movie, like you're like, okay, this is going to be something. And then when it comes around, it just doesn't quite hit where you'd expect. And it's kind of, not limp, but, not as heart-pounding as you'd think that score would get, especially with Hans Zimmer behind it. But I will say, because of the song choice and the Utah section of the movie, I will allow this to get 2.5 points. Title sequence. This title sequence is pretty awesome. Great graphics and theme to it. We get the Chimera mythology heavily played, but there is otherwise zero preview as to what happens in the rest of the movie, and that is a huge deduction. This was established back in the 60s. You gotta do it. 1 point. Cinematography. Now, Woo is really effective at building moments through the use of slow-mo as well as with push-ins. An active camera, as you'd expect for Mission Impossible, and John Woo's signature doves, or pigeons. Even got the Hong Kong classic of double action. Not quite Mission, but I'll still give it 3 points. Character. Ethan Hunt. This movie chooses to highlight Ethan's caring nature, and is otherwise consistent to his other appearances with intelligence and determination and so on. However, he is not emphasized as the ridiculous gambler that he is. He doesn't make these huge risky choices. There is 1 point, but it is more about his caring side than his gambling side, so just 2 points. Team. Luther returns, but while his hacking wizardry is paid lip service to, they don't really build out anything too special for him. They do add a taste for fine clothing, which to me implies a side hustle of sorts, which I do like the out-of-shape gag with him running, and he does deserve props for awareness. Now, Billy is another helicopter pilot, but this time he's Aussie like half the other folk in this movie. He has a couple moments, but is otherwise forgettable. Naya is the thief that gets folded into the team, which this is a type of thing that espionage actually does, including the role she's actually brought in the team for, so Thandi has great chemistry with Tom, but unfortunately I think her character loses a bit too much agency. It's the smallest and mehest team of the franchise. 1 point. Boss. Sir Anthony Hopkins inserts a wit and charisma into this guy, making him interesting while he's on screen, but is otherwise unimportant after the coupling of Ethan and Naya. I do like this tension between his friendly camaraderie and respect for Ethan Hunt versus him having to be his boss. The writing just is not at the level of the performances. 1.5 stars. Antagonists. Sean Ambrose is another good villain who happens to be an IMF agent gone rogue like in 1, but without the mystery. He's an excellent planner and field agent as well as expert in how Ethan operates, having doubled him multiple times. Where the two differ is, Hunt goes out of his way to preserve life, but Ambrose doesn't feel like the job is done unless he leaves bodies behind. He's heavy-handed and aggressive, clever and guarded, greedy and full of lust. Hugh Stamp might be my favorite number 2, despite his inconsistent accent. He's protective of Ambrose, but not always wise with his tongue. He's suspicious and jealous of Naya, and is point man for Sean's team, which is kind of better than Ethan's in my opinion. For the good support, I'll boost it to 3.5 points. Neutral characters. Dr. Neckervich sets things into motion. He has history with and only trusts Ethan Hunt. He's moral and principled, taking great risks to prevent a terrible man-made pandemic. Big fan of Greek mythology and heroes too. I like him. Rest in peace. Then the Biosite CEO is of course driven by greed, even to the point of murdering the other chief scientist to see exactly what Chimera is capable of. But of course he can't outplay Ethan and Ambrose. Now Naya would normally be folded into this group, but since she's actually made a member of the team, it's just these guys and 1.5 points. Conflict. Just how impossible is the impossible mission? Ethan must recruit a thief and former lover of Sean Ambrose, a rogue IMF agent, who intends to release a superflu and make billions off the antivirus now in his possession. And Hunt cannot make a move on him until he understands exactly what Sean's got.
Where he's got it, or what he's doing in Sydney with it.
And this is what Naya is for. She's brought in to get this information, but her and Ethan's attraction for one another makes things difficult. I like this plot a good bit, but it's missing that mystery intrigue angle to it, which would have elevated the conflict even higher, and because it doesn't have it, what should be a 3 is a 2. Stunts. Tom steps up his workload a ton from 1. He rock climbs in Utah, as well as Sydney. Does some cool car stuff, but I'll tell you, it's a bit more limited than what we'll see him do later on. However, the motorcycle riding is pure distilled Tom Cruise risk. And just look at this collision. Loads of fighting and talk about spinning and kicking. Might be a little too much kicking for Ethan Hunt, but hey, it's too cool to criticize. And you just simply cannot forget this extremely dangerous knife stunt, where a simple safety cable prevents Tom Cruise from being a pirate. Plus 3 points. Set pieces. We start with the taking over of a commercial airline where we meet our antagonists and see them operate as a skilled unit, as well as just how far they're willing to take things. Then we see how Ethan Hunt relaxes between missions. The movie's action pulls back for a while, but I've got to highlight the first and second date. Cool stuff, Woo, with the perfect touch of melodrama, at least in these scenes. And I really like the horse track too. Naya has to pickpocket Sean, hand off to Ethan, wait for an upload, and return the drive to Sean without him or Hugh catching the two. But unfortunately for her, she places it back into the wrong pocket. Now the big set piece is the Biosite break-in. We see Ethan plan and infiltrate, as Sean also details how Ethan will do it, and how his team will use this information to get the upper hand. We get this cool diving entry, big shootouts, high emotional stakes. It's a great showcase for the difference between the protagonist and the antagonist. I love this sequence. It's great. The island meetup is pretty good too. I like how the pigeons give Ethan away, but he doesn't allow that to disadvantage him one bit. And this section has one of my favorite mission fakeouts. The climax is a pretty great 1v1 with a completely ridiculous button you can't help but like. 3 points. Ticking clocks. We've got the 20-hour incubation period, which folds back into the climax, but I honestly stopped caring about that and just focus on the action that's going on. We've got Stamp closing in on Ethan, being detailed by how many steps away he is. Biosite is full of ticking clocks. With the 40 seconds to get into the atrium and remove the cable, there's the 8 minutes of no contact between Ethan and his team, which prevents Luther from warning him about Ambrose showing up with Naya there. Plus an 18-second car bomb that's placed onto Luther's van. If I cared more about Naya needing the antivirus, I would give it 3 points, but 2 points. Interpersonal conflicts. There's the honeypot inception where Hopkins uses Ethan to honeypot Naya so that Ethan can then persuade Naya to honeypot Ambrose, while Ambrose is fully aware of what's going on and enjoys it until it breaks his heart. There's a bit of tension between Luther and Billy, but not really much. However, I really love Hugh thinking he's got a good insight, only to be put in his place. Because of that scene, I'll give 2.5 points. Story. Narrative. Unable to find Ethan Hunt, IMF sends Sean Ambrose to double him to extract an associate to Hunt, only for Ambrose to go rogue and take possession of Biosite's new antivirus. Ethan is then brought in to clean up the mess, but his attraction to an asset strains the operation and jeopardizes millions. Again, it's okay, but the lacking agency of Naya in the back half, one decision is not enough, as well as not utilizing a mystery intrigue approach to complement the story and conflict, holds this back. It really makes 2 disposable, so 1.5 points. Character progression. Ethan really stepped up his fighting game after that old man embarrassed him in the first movie, and has also become more of the vehicle expert and like skydiver that we see throughout the rest of the franchise. But I can't help but feel he's way too naive in this romantically, especially considering the romance in 1. He doesn't even account for Ambrose being onto them in the late game. Plus he doesn't make quite the gambles that we expect, so it's a bit of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. I'll give the edge out to action, so 2 points. Romance. The first romance might be reserved, but 2 is decidedly not. These lovers burn bright and fast. Too fast, actually. If they had pulled back a bit and made Ethan become cold to Naya after learning why she's in the team, causing friction and anger from her, I think their progression and dynamic would be far more believable. And the moment when she injects herself with the virus would be when she finally realizes that Ethan's demeanor was a facade and he does actually care for her. Still, they have excellent chemistry and she's the most sensual of the franchise. The music and cinematography bolsters up their pairing as well. 2 points. Twist and turns. The first Ethan that you see is actually Ambrose in a mask. Next, we learn alongside Ethan that Naya is not being recruited as a thief, but as a honeypot. Then we see Ambrose confirm his suspicions with her, and it turns out that Sean could have got the virus at the very beginning if he didn't have such a compulsion to leave behind Carnage. And there's a big one with Hugh I'll talk about later. Gotta save some of it for the fake outs, right? Plus 3 points. Resolution. Ambrose kind of forces Ethan to kill him. Would be a bit more meaningful if he hadn't killed like 30 people before this point. Naya isn't saved from a miserable death. All the virus and research is destroyed by fire, and happily ever after. Except Naya doesn't show up again. Plus 1 point, that's really just for destroying the virus and stuff against orders. Mythos. The Legend of Ethan Hunt. The villain uses his intimate knowledge of Ethan Hunt to set the movie into motion and outmaneuver him at the Biosite lab. Off memory, I would have said making this stuff textual this early was a mistake, but nah. 3 points. Spy gear. This movie introduces the voice modulator. And by way of rocket, there's a sunglasses brief. There's Naya's makeup sensor, undetectable transponder chip. Honestly, the movie's kind of light on spy gear, but it makes up for it with the most masks in the franchise. Plus 3 points, okay. Locations and infiltrations. There's the Rockies that the plane gets flown into. And there's Utah where the IMF tracks down Ethan Hunt. Seville, Spain houses a couple different things, but way too much is spent in Sydney, Australia. It isn't that Sydney is bad or that they don't vary the environments while they're there, but Mission is meant to hop from place to place like a kangaroo across the globe. The movie even ends in Sydney, so minus 2 points, 1 point. Disavowed. Neither Ethan nor any member of his team are disavowed. And while they're going against former IMF agents, Hopkins never declares them disavowed either. Awful. Minus 1 point. I'd go so far to say that is exactly why this movie is the worst in the franchise. Fake outs. We, the audience, think Ambrose is going to hit the CEO, while Ethan goes to extract Naya. But Hunt was extracting the information from the CEO, while Ambrose was confirming his suspicions. Great stuff. Then Ethan is beat down and brought to the mercy of Ambrose, and Sean's need for
getting your gun off.
precedes his realization that Hunt switched places with Hugh, making Sean kill his number 2 and allowing a diversion to steal the antivirus.
I like it a lot.
4 points. And also Anthony Hopkins gives us this line.
This is not mission difficult, Mr. Hunt. It's mission impossible. Difficult should be a walk in the park for you.
Plus another point, and that puts us up to a total of 51 points. And so for the bonus, without this movie, we would not have Mission Improbable.
In order to do my job, I have to ask myself, who is Tom Cruise? What is Tom Cruise? Why is Tom Cruise?
Plus 10 points for a total of 61 points. How does the movie stack up for you? Are you like me, where this is the worst movie of the franchise, where you kind of dread watching it again, but when it's on, you're like, hey, you know what? This is a pretty fun movie. This is entertaining. I don't want to look away. And then when it ends, you're like, I could never watch that movie again. That's how I feel about it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Goodbye.
I don't know, it's kind of like we almost finish each other's sentences, kind of.
I mean, I don't think we've ever finished each other's sentences.